All right, so welcome to Stories Live. It is Wednesday, October 19th, and we are doing our The Future is Dark um, themed show tonight. So let's see, for this evening, we have three readers. We have Steve Anderson, Deb Courtney, and Shannon Lawrence. And I believe everybody who is reading tonight has actually read before. So welcome back, everybody. And let's see. So I guess just a few things to know. This show is all about authors reading their own work. Each piece is about 20 minutes. I am looking for readers for our November show, and the theme is Family Matters. So we do that. If it sounds familiar, it's because we do that every year just because I love the theme. So that is going to be November 16th. That's a Wednesday also, and it will be at 7 p.m. So like from about 7 p.m. to 9ish. So yeah, feel free to email me or message me, and I would be happy to consider you as a reader for that show. So yeah, I guess that at this point I can welcome our first reader, Steve Anderson. Steve has quite a collection of dinosaur stuff in his background, and he has a series on Kindle Vella called If These Walls Could Talk, among other things. So also like a story in the recent Pikes Peak Writers anthology. But yeah, I will bring Steve on here. Hello.
Hi, how are you this evening?
I am good.
Good.
I'm enjoying, the dinosaurs and the pumpkin in the background.
Gotta have a lot of clutter. It makes me happy. Yeah.
Clutter. Oh God, no, you don't know clutter unless you've seen, how I live. Ugh. Um, but okay, so yeah, we were chatting about this earlier. Well,
Yeah.
so much earlier, like a few minutes earlier,
hmm
about what you're gonna read. So you've got the Kindle Vella, If These Walls Could Talk, and you have a piece from that you're going to be
Right.
reading.
This is one episode from that, and If These Walls Can Talk actually just went live on Kindle Unlimited, and is available as paperback now. So
Yay!
as of a couple of days ago, so it's complete and it's live. So this is one of the episodes. It's kind of a collection of stories that are have a consistant character arc across them, but each one is somewhat standalone. So I'll provide a little bit of an intro for this one, and then we should be good to go.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. In the story, our narrator is John Calais. He's able to hear what walls say when they talk. This skill makes him invaluable to his friend and lover, homicide detective Emily Lindell of the St. Louis Police Department. John has revealed to her some of how this works, that the memories are not stored in the swirl of plaster and paint, but that something lives in the walls, watching and remembering everything that happens in front of him. A person can get lost in those memories, their soul trapped by whatever lives there. And that's what happened to John's fiancée, Claire, 5 years ago. She never made it out. Daria, excuse me. Daria buzzed me in, held the door open, then blocked it with her body. John Calais, it's been a while. From anyone else, that might have meant they'd missed me. I knew better with Daria. The raised eyebrows, the lowered chin, the thrust of her hips smashing the door open against the stop, the look in her eyes daring me to make an excuse. That's right. It's been too long, and I don't have an excuse. I tried to squeeze past her, and she wasn't having it. You mean you have one and you're ashamed to use it? You've been with that detective lady. I saw your name mixed up with hers in the news, the Adelaide business last month. I read it in the paper, and I read it to Claire, too. I winced. I asked them not to use my name. Daria shifted her weight and gave the door another shove. Because you're ashamed. I looked into her eyes. Not of anything I've done with Emily. She nodded and let me through the front door of the Firmin Deloge care facility to write my name in the visitor log. John, it's going to hurt her, you moving on. Can't blame you, not after all this time, but Claire will feel it. She cries sometimes, you know. I knew. My signature in the visitor logbook became more illegible than usual. I put my hand in my pocket so Daria wouldn't see it shaking. Everything that made Claire who she was is lost. She can't even talk. It's all an echo. That's what her neurologist told me. Daria followed me toward Claire's room. She's had a good morning, ate all her lunch, then walked 5 miles on the treadmill. I set the trail app to Streets of Paris. That's her favorite. She'll walk for hours if we don't shut it off. I put my hand on the door to Claire's room, angry with Daria for making this harder than it needed to be. We never got to Paris. That's lost too. She put her hands on her hips. You go tell her goodbye then. That's why you came, isn't it? My resolve came back. Yes, that's why I came. I entered Claire's room and slammed the door to keep Daria out. Claire turned slowly from her place at the window. A small movement of her lips became a smile. The crinkle of lines around her eyes brought her face to life. I knelt next to her. 100 times I'd visited since she'd gone looking for a memory and lost her way. Never had she acknowledged me, not a glance, not a word. I touched her face, her hair, afraid the miracle would fade. John. Her eyes closed as she struggled to speak, but it was Claire's voice, sweet and gentle despite the effort it was taking. You came. I gave her a kiss. Where are you, Claire? Same place, always. This room? She opened her eyes and her pupils dilated, responding to light and shadow I couldn't see. She tried to answer, gave up with a sad sigh. She stared at the wall, no longer seeing me. I cradled her cheek with my hand and turned her back to me. The warehouse? I searched where they found your body, but couldn't find you. The walls there, they go deep, and every memory is a trap. A slow grin twisted her lips. Duh. I grinned back. My Claire, I'll go right now and search the walls until I find you. I heard they're getting ready to tear the whole place down. I thought it might bring you peace, but if you're still trapped inside, I'll get you out. Her eyes drifted away from mine, seeing other places, other times. Her voice dropped to a soft whisper. Can't tell if you're really here. You look like a memory. I have so many memories of you. She blinked several times, and a fierce sparkle appeared in her eyes. Her voice steadied. She raised her arm and reached for something that wasn't in the room. Touch the wall with me, John. I nodded, the cold reality of what we needed to do sinking into my stomach. Of course, you need to be there with me. The first step was getting past Daria. I lifted Claire to her feet, and she stood. I held her coat for her. She slid her arms into the sleeves, and I snugged her bright pink stocking hat on the back of her head, pushing blonde hair away from blue eyes. I wrapped her arm around mine and pulled her forward. She put one foot in front of the other until we were out into the hall. Just where do you think you're taking her, John? Daria came around the reception desk and blocked our path. Out. We're going for a ride. Daria positioned herself between me and the door. My job's keeping her safe. You're not family, and you're not a doctor. It's important, Daria. You know me. I'd never do anything to hurt her. Ha, Claire said, not helping my case. Daria's eyes became huge. I doubted she'd ever heard Claire's voice. Excuse me? Claire's eyes fluttered as she struggled to focus on Daria. Going out. Daria stepped back. Lordy, she talked. What did you do to her? She looked right at me and she said, I guided Claire toward the door. She said, out. I'll bring her back. Daria fumbled with her badge and held it to the card reader, her hands shaking. But she regained her composure enough to threaten me before the door closed. See that you do, Professor, or I will hunt you down. I walked toward the car and whispered to myself, I'll probably be dead by then. The walls are going to take us both. Yep, Claire answered. I'd rehearsed how saying goodbye to Claire would go. She'd sat unmoving like always, eyes staring sightlessly straight ahead. I'd explained what I felt for Emily and that it didn't change our love and the happily ever after we'd almost had. I'd tell her I wouldn't be back to visit as often, and Claire wouldn't respond, and that would hurt more than anything else she might do. I'd kiss her forehead, then I'd leave. What I hadn't planned was to walk out the front door with Claire on my arm. Emily waited in the car, per my request. I didn't want to explain my tears to her, and I didn't want her to say she understood what was impossible for her to understand. I opened the rear passenger door, helped Claire in, and fastened the seatbelt around her. Emily turned to watch. Is that Claire? What are you doing? I nodded, as if strapping a semi-comatose woman into my car was a normal thing to do, as if it wasn't the first step on a dark, unknown path. No one ever came back after the walls had taken them. They always ended up sitting in a chair, growing old day by day, until their bodies finally gave up and released them. That was Claire's future. I knew it was true. Yet here I was, taking the risk that I'd soon be sitting in a chair next to her. I closed the door and got behind the wheel. We need to take her back to Riverview Moving and Storage. The old warehouse? The police barricaded it off to keep everyone safe. They're going to implode it tomorrow at 9 to make room for more condos. And the mayor will be there himself to push the button. Tell me something I don't know. It's locked up tight, Johnny. There's private security from the demolition company and a couple of SLPD officers. You're not getting in. I stopped at a red light and turned to look at Emily. Something more was bothering her than sneaking into an abandoned building, but I didn't have time or patience to dig it out. Show your badge, Em. They know you. They'll let you in. We have to do this. Claire talked to me when I went into her room. It's the first time in 5 years I've heard her voice. Do you know what that means? Yeah, I think I do. Her voice broke when she said it, but the light changed before I could ask what was wrong. I swerved past a van double parked outside Bessinger's, got honked at, topped out at twice the posted limit before getting stuck behind a slow-moving UPS truck. Emily braced her hands on the dash. I'm going to need the badge to keep you out of jail. You keep driving like this. She glanced back at Claire, frowned. You made it sound like she was some kind of zombie wasting away in there. She looks normal, and beautiful. I looked at Claire in the mirror. She was beautiful, the way a mannequin or wax figure can be beautiful. I'd have to thank Daria for that much, at least. She made sure Claire ate, exercised, and got out of the building once in a while. But I'd seen Claire's face full of life. There was no comparison. I smiled at the reflection, remembering the day we'd... Johnny! I tapped the brakes, passed on the right, my tires up over the curb. Emily glared at me, breathing hard. When we get there, I'll do the talking. You keep her somewhere out of the way. Don't let anyone see that no one's home expression. I'll keep her turned away. Not you, or not her. You, Johnny. Are you here with me at all? It was a good question, and I knew the answer was no. I slowed to the speed limit and crawled north on Broadway with the rest of the traffic. Yeah, I'm here. I'm with you. It's just... I checked Claire in the mirror again, smiled at her. I thought I'd lost her. It was my fault. Now I have a chance to make it right. Emily studied me a moment. Eyes narrowed the way they get when she's working a case, and her voice became cold, the way it gets when she thinks she's being lied to. Is there? You told me no one comes back after the walls take them. What are you going to do when this doesn't work? I checked Claire's reflection. I'll make it work. I know more than when I tried 5 years ago. I'm good at this. I focused on the road in front of me. If I fail, she goes back to that place, back to her chair. Emily asked softly, and if it does work? I sighed, imagining it. Claire gets her life back. She's a reporter, you know, a damn good one, and she writes poetry, amazing stuff that'll give you chills. And she's working on a novel, a historical romance, if you can believe it. Emily grunted, and I realized I was on the edge of a very high cliff if I hadn't already stepped off. It's not going to change our relationship, Em. What Claire and I had is gone. She gets her life back, that's all. I glanced over my shoulder and gave Claire a quick, reassuring smile. The perfect waxwork of her face was expressionless, so I didn't know if I'd heard her, or if she accepted it, or if she had heard my words at all. Emily leaned back and stared out the window. Sure thing, Johnny. I pulled against the curb in the shadow of a billboard inviting me to invest in St. Louis's hottest new residential development. One of the guards walked toward us, waving us to move on. Emily got out to talk to him, not even glancing at me. Stay here. I'll see what I can do. After a short conversation, Emily walked with the guard toward the building, hands jammed deep in the pockets of her coat. I turned in my seat. She'll get us in, Claire. Emily is good at this kind of stuff. I should have told you about her a long time ago. I've been helping her solve crimes the way my dad used to. It's darker work than the stories I explored with you, but it's satisfying. Claire tipped her head to the side and her eyes fluttered as she struggled to speak. Danger. Yes, it can be dangerous. Emily's had to pull me out a couple of times. Claire closed her eyes, her face scrunched up, cheeks red. Her voice was sharp and clear. No, take me home. Run. Don't listen to them. I tried to calm her. It's gonna be all right, Claire. I'll find you. I'll pull you out. The color drained from her face, and she opened blank eyes that stared at nothing. Emily tapped on my window a moment later, and I opened the door. Okay, Johnny, I talked Ruiz into 30 minutes. It's going to cost me, so that means it's going to cost you. I got out and walked around the back of the car. What did he ask you to do? Babysitting, so he and Gita can get out of the house. Tomorrow at 6:30 and two more evenings to be named later. That doesn't sound so bad. I'll go with you. Damn right you will. I've met his kids. There are 5 of them, all under 10. Hearing them scream makes my uterus shrink. There's a reason I don't have any of my own, you know. I love kids, I told her. I'll get you through it. She nodded. And take me to Kemmel's for dinner next week. That's my price. A good meal and then somewhere for live blues and drinks afterward. I gave her a quick kiss. Kemmel's? You don't come cheap, Detective Lindell, but you are always worth the price. I opened the back door and undid Claire's seatbelt. Emily took a step back as though she was afraid of Claire. It's weird. She looks so normal, like she should climb out of there and ask me what the hell I'm doing kissing you. I lifted Claire from the car. Nothing in her eyes acknowledged my arm around her. I wanted to tell her what the hell I was doing kissing Emily. I wanted the chance to explain it. If I could do that, talk to Claire with her truly alive, then maybe my love for Emily wouldn't feel so much like betrayal. Claire's eyes looked straight at me, bright in a face without expression. Almost there, John. I shivered, pulled her arm. She followed me. She followed along next to me. Emily stayed a half step behind us, her hands clenched into fists, shoulders hunched. You know where you're going, Johnny? Yeah, like it was yesterday. Do you know what you're doing? That's a whole nother question. I pulled Claire to a stop in front of the door leading to where it had happened. A couple of high schools broke into the Riverview 5 years ago and posted a video of the stuff people had abandoned here. Redevelopment in this area was just getting started, and Claire thought it would make a good story. I told her I'd come along to listen to the walls for anything interesting. I got stuck in a faculty meeting and couldn't make it, so she went alone. I didn't warn her not to listen. I'd shown her how to do it, but always happy memories. I didn't warn her, and she got lost. Emily nodded, staring at her shoes. You do what you have to do, but I'm pulling you out after 10 minutes. And if you get lost, Johnny, I won't come to visit. I tipped her chin up, and we kissed. Yes, you would. Emily flicked the light switch, and the old fluorescent tubes hanging from chains above us buzzed and flickered to life. She gave me a crooked grin that didn't hide her fear and worry. Don't make me come in there after you. I sat on the floor, drawing Claire down next to me. She put her palm against mine and intertwined our fingers. Her eyes stared at me from her beautiful, pale face, pupils wide despite the harsh light. Come find me, John. We touched the wall together, and the wall took me back to a memory of violence. A young woman wore the cloche hat and drop-waist dress typical of the 1920s. I lived with her through the moment when fear changed to panic. The men holding her arms shoved her to her knees, and she begged for her life, and I wept with her. The walls urged me to stay and watch her death, but I pulled away before the bullet entered the back of her skull. I wondered if that was the same memory they'd used to lure Claire in deeper and deeper until the weight of memories closed over her head like cold water. Solving an ancient murder wasn't why I had come. I moved as the walls allowed, searching for the memory of the woman I'd loved and abandoned. They were happy to show me. I felt the trap in the images of Claire exploring the room, Claire placing her hand on the dented, stained drywall, and Claire slumping to the floor, eyes wide in terror. And the walls delighted in my pain. Maybe you missed something. We'll show it to you again and again. I pulled my hand away, out of breath, panting. Emily came back into focus, her head tipped in a silent question. Not working, I told her, and slammed my hand against the wall before she could stop me. The walls talked like they always talk. They showed Claire on the floor and the homeless man who'd found her hours later and saved her life. But what I wanted, what I needed, remained hidden. I fought to peel open the space between the stories, searching for Claire's soul. Maybe my probing worked. Maybe she reached out to me. A crack opened into the gray, featureless space wherever, whatever it is that lives in the walls exists. Claire sat in a green winged-back chair on a floor I couldn't see, staring out a window mounted in gray mist. She turned when I came near, a crooked smile on her lips, blue eyes wide, seeming surprised and happy I was there. You're better at this than when you that you're better at this than you were when you lost me, John. She nodded at something behind me. You still have a path. Not many that come this far do. I didn't. She looked behind I looked behind me. Emily seemed impossibly far away as she paced under the bright flicker of fluorescent lights, arms crossed while she waited for me to return. I took a slow step toward Claire, afraid she'd vanish before I reached her. I should have been with you. Take my hand. She stood, and the chair and the window were gone, leaving us alone in the space between things the walls remember. She came close without a word, arms wrapped around my neck, and her lips touched mine. I crushed Claire against me, feeling every kiss we'd ever shared and all the ones we'd missed. The feel of her body woke me from a 5-year nightmare. My assurance to Emily about nothing changing became a lie in less than a second, and I couldn't force myself to feel the remorse I should have felt. Claire pulled back, and I whispered into her hair, My God, Claire, I can touch you, feel you, smell you. I wasn't sure how this would work. It's never been done. I have you back with me. Everything is possible again. The path is open for us. Let's go home. She leaned back in the circle of my arms, and a smile twisted the corner of her mouth, inviting me to kiss the mystery out of her. No, John. You stay here with me. I laughed, thinking it a joke. She pouted, lower lip out and eyes downcast. I'm serious. Why would I want to go back to that flat, linear world you live in? I touched her lips, and she playfully bit at my fingers, an old game I'd almost forgotten. This isn't life, Claire. This is hell. I came to see you dozens of times. What you left behind. We need to put you back together. I laughed at the thought of it, how what had seemed impossible was within reach. She stepped away and waved her hands, dismissing the thought. That's not me, that thing, that shell. It can't be done, and I don't want to do it. There is so much I can show you. The stories, the lives that have passed through here. I know them all. You're going to love it. I reached for her and she took my hands. Claire, this place won't exist tomorrow. Everything in the walls is going to die, including you. She kissed my nose, sending a hot shiver through me, something else I'd almost forgotten. You're so sweet, John. That's not how this works. We'll skip to somewhere else, that's all. We'll live and explore. Do you want to see what happened in the old Union Station 100 years ago? I've heard stories. Come with me and we'll see them together. We can live it, smell it, taste it, be part of it. And if we get bored, we can move on. 1,000 lifetimes and more, you and me. Blue eyes stared into mine. Claire's lips parted in a smile, waiting, wanting. Say yes, John. Be with me. Be part of me. A sharp sting on my cheek made me wince. I twisted to look behind me. Gray mist drifted where the path had been, but I could still see Emily moving in a bright glow, her hand raised to strike something or someone on the floor at her feet. Claire gently turned me back to her. That pain is your past. Your future is here. Walk with me. She grinned, her eyes alive with excitement. I have so much to show you. I reached for her, ready to follow, and then when a strange sensation stopped me. My lips were warm. A mixed feeling of excitement and comfort radiated through me from Emily's lips on mine. I heard her call my name, her voice full of despair, close to panic. I released Claire's hand and licked lips that had suddenly become dry. Claire wouldn't want me to stay here. She laughed, a carefree, happy sound. Claire's laugh. But I do, John. I'm not complete without you. I nodded, certain now of the trap. Then you're not Claire. She always wanted what was best for me. That's what her love was like, and she was a complete, whole person all on her own. I looked around the gray fog. Is she even here? The thing that wasn't Claire narrowed her blue eyes. Oh, yes. I'll take you to her, and you can set her free. Come with me. Otherwise, she'll die tomorrow when the walls fall. Don't you want to be with her? Maybe save her? I shivered. I could find Claire. That felt true. Escape? No. They wanted me dead. Why kill me? I don't understand. And then Emily tugged on me before the answer could come. I fell into her embrace, and the gray gave way to flickering lights over my head. Emily wiped her eyes. You back with me, Johnny? I nodded. Yeah. I gave her a weak smile. If I ever again say something about being good at this, punch me hard. He tapped between my eyes. Right here. Sure thing. That's what I was going to try next. Emily touched the back of my hand as though afraid to hold it. Johnny, was she in there? Do you need to try again? I shook my head, wanting to believe that what I was about to say was true. No, just a trap. It wasn't her. I turned to Claire. But enough of the real Claire leaked through to warn me. If I'd been listening, she's still there somewhere, out of reach. They won't let me have her. Claire was next to me on the floor, eyes blank, staring at the wall. Did she say anything while I was gone? Did she do anything? Emily shrugged. She was like that most of the time. She cried a little, and she held up a crumpled wreck of a tissue. Well, I only had one of these, so we shared. I looked around at the cold, empty room, but not empty, full of voices, memories, and lies. They used Claire as bait. They want me to die with them when the building comes down tomorrow, but I don't know why. Claire nodded, cheeks flushed with the effort, alive for the moment. Told you not to listen. I'll try again. Be ready. I took Claire home, and I told Daria a story about driving around St. Louis to see places we'd once loved. I stayed at Emily's house all night, and we argued about walls and life and death and the dangers of things no one can ever understand. I arrived back at the Furman Deloge Care Facility the next morning at 8:30. Claire was on the treadmill, walking at a comfortable pace. I started the machine next to hers, and she smiled at me. Paris, she said, and took my hand so we could walk the sidewalks together. Rue de Bac. Might rain later. It does that sometimes. Daria grunted. She watched us from across the room, blocking the door as though afraid I'd try to steal Claire again. Listen to the chatterbox. Been like that all morning. 5 years and not a word. Whatever you did yesterday is bringing her back. I called Dr. Brubaker so he can come take a look at her. I glanced at the clock. Almost 9. The TV above the fireplace showed the news, a live feed from near the old warehouse. I didn't know what it would do to Claire when it came down, but I wanted to be with her when it happened. I pointed at the screen on the treadmill. Is that the one? She nodded. Yes, right there. You remember looking at it online? Café de nos rêves. Perfect for us. The cafe of our dreams. Your French is very good. She shivered, and goosebumps rose and fell on her arms. She gave me a smile with her eyes wide. I see it now, John. I promise you won't be sad. The TV showed smoke and brick dust encircling the old building, a distant rumble and cheers from the crowd. Claire stumbled to a stop. I stepped around to catch her, but she didn't fall. Lifeless eyes returned to the scenes of Paris, to a sidewalk cafe we'd never share. Claire? My love? She didn't answer. Daria came up beside us and took Claire's hand. That's enough walking. Let's get you back to your room now, sweetheart. I'll put your chair by the window. It's pretty out. A bit of snow, just starting to fall. Daria waited while I kissed Claire's forehead. I'll try to keep the promise, my love, but if it's okay with you, I'll be sad for a little while first. I looked into her eyes and at the corner of her mouth, searching for a last smile that never came. That's the end.
All right. Yay, Steve. So, let's see. So yes, you have completed this Vela, so you
Right.
now have it
It's been moved over onto normal Kindle and Amazon world.
nice. So are you doing another Vela one of these days, or are you like I'm
I
over
might.
Vela?
I haven't decided. It's an
Okay.
interesting format, but it's tough to write to.
Okay, yeah. Well, and it seems like, something that I've heard from a lot of people is it's also just hard to, get the word out because I mean it's
Yes.
kind of
There's
buried.
not very many people have heard of it, so
Hmm.
that kind of makes it a black hole.
Yeah, I felt so cutting edge, when we had the
Yeah.
Kindle Vella show, and then I was like, where
Right.
have I been? What rock have I been under? Because,
Yeah.
usually that is the explanation, but then they were like, oh no, no, it's brand new. And I was like, oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. But thank you so much, as
Okay.
always, for reading. And next up, we have Deb Courtney, who I am pleased to say she will be guest hosting the Family Matters show in November. So that's going to be on the 17th. So, hello, Deb.
Hi.
You look so gothic here.
My attempt to control the lighting.
Oh, okay.
Your mileage may vary.
All right.
Happy to be here. I'm reading an excerpt tonight from a novel that's actually out on Query. But when you told
Ooh.
me about this topic, I thought of this whole scene fitting this topic. Uh, Language warning. We're all grown-ups, but it's there. Here we
Okay.
go.
All right.
Her bottle of wine was not there. It figured. After making herself go to the shrink, after bearing her stupid soul, after conceding that she might could use some antidepressants and anti-anxieties, after making sure her stupid insurance even covered them, and standing in line at the pharmacy behind 27 million stupid people who didn't know what they wanted, who didn't know how to pay, who wrote checks for prescriptions, and really, in this day and age, who writes a fucking check for a prescription? All she wanted was her bottle of wine. Well, two of them. So she'd stopped by the liquor store, assuring herself that under no circumstances would she mix the wine with the very dangerous pills she now had in her possession, that she would wait until after the alcohol left her system to start the drugs. So now, of course, the one thing she wanted, about worse than anything, was that one bottle of wine. Well, two bottles of that one wine. And it was not there. She headed to the register and stood in line behind several other people. Mary, the owner, was running the register, slowly, as usual. Else had never noticed how slow Mary was. Well, yes, actually she had, but she'd never been so incredibly aware of it as she was in this moment. At last, she reached the head of the line. She pasted a bright smile on her face and said, "Mary, hi, is Ben here?" "No, he's working in the back. Can I help you with something?" "Sure, I'm looking for the Altos. Wine?" Mary gave her a blank look. Except for maybe recognizing Else as someone who'd been in the store before, it was clear Mary didn't know her and had no clue what she was talking about. Where the hell was Ben? Ben would fix this right away. She felt tears of frustration well up, but tamped them down. Crying never solved anything. Well, unless it was done on her bathroom floor at 3 a.m. And then it still never solved anything, but at least she was doing it alone. "So I come in every week and I buy a few bottles of the Altos, and there doesn't seem to be any on the shelf." Else trailed off, assuming, or really, well, hoping, that Mary would become useful. It was very clear that she should not hold her breath waiting for that to happen. She caught sight of herself in the mirror behind the pint bottles kept behind the register. She could see the tension around her eyes. It widened her hopeful smile to compensate. It looked a bit forced, even to her. "Oh, there's none on the shelf?" asked Mary. "Well," Else said slowly, carefully, hearing a note of condescension that had crept into her voice and not really caring, though at some level feeling that she'd hit dangerous ground. "Well, Mary, I come in every week and I buy 2 bottles of the same exact wine. In fact, Ben turned me onto it, and I have turned many of my friends onto it. And every week it's in the same place. If it were there, I wouldn't be asking. So, no, it's not there. Maybe you have some in the back?" "Oh, if you buy 2 bottles a week, maybe you should consider buying a case. We do offer a 10% case discount." Mary trailed off, as helpful apparently now as she was going to get. "I'd rather just have my regular order." "But a case offers substantial savings." "I don't want a case," Else snapped. Then she forced her voice down into a more cheerful facsimile of her normal tone. "I don't need a case. I prefer my regular order of 2 bottles. And, well, offering me a discount on a case of wine you may or may not have doesn't really do me much good." "If we don't have it, I'm happy to order it for you," said Mary. Else bit the inside of her cheek hard. The pain focused her a little. "I don't want you to order me a case. I'd just like 2 bottles. Can you check or have someone check to see if you actually have any in the back? I'm kind of in a rush." "Well, we can ask Ben when he comes back up. He should be here in just a minute. Can you wait right over here?" Mary gestured to the next register and its "Please see other cashier" sign. "Look, can you ask him now? It's been a very long day and I'm really in a rush." Sure, said Mary. "Just wait over there." "Excuse me," came a woman's voice from just over Elsa's shoulder. "If you aren't buying anything, can I go now? I do need to get home." Else froze for a moment, then turned her head. "I'm sorry. Do you think you're more important than me?" No, do you think you're more important than the rest of the people in this line? Look, I just want my wine. I waited in line. I just want my wine and then I'll be going. Well, clearly it's going to take a few minutes. The reasonable thing to do is step aside and let the rest of us complete our transactions. I'm sorry, are you accusing me of holding up the line? Els heard her voice rise in tone. I don't hold up lines. This is so simple. If the wine were on the shelf or she would just get me some, I would already be done. Maybe you need that wine just a little too badly. Maybe a bottle of wine isn't worth all this fuss. Els almost shook her head in disbelief. Had she heard that properly? Had that woman really just said, what? And she fully turned. She tipped her head to the right, leaned back, and then let her body round after her. The very large smile still plastered on her face would have made her developers at the office quake and maybe run from her. But this woman behind her was clearly clueless, had no idea who she was dealing with. Sorry, but it sounds like you may have insinuated that I have an alcohol problem, Els began in a low, slow voice. Her son knew to fear this voice. Her IT team knew to fear this voice. This woman was clueless. This line monitoring bitch had no fucking clue. So, do I know you? No, said the line monitor. Then you have no clue about me or what my day has been like or what my week has been like or frankly what my entire fucking existence has been like. So I don't need you to get all judgy at me when all I want is a stupid bottle of wine, the same wine I buy here every stupid Friday for the last year. Mary knows I'm a regular. Ben is in the back. He knows I'm a regular. And if you can have one iota of fucking patience, I'll have my stupid bottle and be out of here. Bottles, said the judgy wine bitch. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, you're getting multiple bottles. Els stared at her, this judgy wine lady, and all the emotions she'd been holding at bay all day built up a deep force of hurt and pressure, low in her chest and rising, and Els could only surmise that it also came with a deep flush of hurt and rage that showed on her skin. Look, bitch, Els almost whispered, when your throat is choked up with tears or screaming, it's difficult to get words past it. She cleared her throat, and at the same time, her eyes grew hot with more unshed tears. Look, lady, really, this is none of your business. I'm doing my damnedest, no, my goddamnedest, to remain anything that looks like civil. But seriously, if you want to take me on, then you go right ahead. It will be the worst decision you have made in a long time, maybe ever. But yeah, you go right ahead. You want to know what my life has been like recently? Of course you don't. But you know what? Your inability to keep your nose out of other people's business has just brought you a first-class front row ticket to Elsland. 2 years ago, my husband fucked my best friend. Last week, he married her and he didn't bother to tell our son before he fucking eloped. 3 weeks ago, I had a miscarriage. Oh yes, pregnant at 42 by a man who's really not a good prospect for the future, but whom I probably desperately love anyway. Last night, I sat on my bathroom floor and thought to myself, it wouldn't really matter if I just ended it. Slit my fucking wrists and watched the blood drop out bit by bloody bit and just let it all go. And do you know why I didn't? Do you know? Judgy wine bitch looked distressed now and had stepped back a pace or two during the diatribe, Elsa's monologue of stupidity. And Els heard all these words spilling out of her mouth and realized that at some point she decided to scream, not cry. Or, well, maybe not decided anything, but here we were. Answer me. Do you know why? I'm sorry I bothered you. Of course, just get your wine. It's fine. Everything's wine. Fine. Judgy wine bitch answered, not flushed like Els herself was, but white and shocked, stepping back again into the people waiting in line behind her. Els lasered in on her judgy wine bitch face, realizing that now tears were falling down her face in spite of her apparent desire to just scream her frustration out. Oh no, you don't get to backpedal now. You pushed it. You had to push it. You probably always fucking push it. And now you're going to answer the question. Do you know why? Just guess. Take a wild guess. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't guess. Because I couldn't figure out who would clean up the fucking blood. That's why. The words hung in the store, over her head, over the heads of the 5 or 6 other patrons. Els couldn't believe those words had left her mouth. She hadn't even admitted these thoughts to the shrink earlier that day, and now she just spewed them to complete strangers, and in front of Mary, and in front of Ben. Furious, she wiped tears away from under her glasses and plastered a broken smile back on her face. It was a brittle analog of what a real smile might look like, but which in fact felt as if her face might crack into several million small pieces if she maintained it too long. She turned to Mary. Any chance? And now the words really did catch in her throat. She cleared her throat again and caught sight of herself again in the mirror behind the pint bottles. Her face was now devoid of color, as if the blood in her skin and the makeup had all fallen off. Corpse-like, wild-eyed. Mary stared at her, also wild-eyed. Can you just get Ben? Alice asked, sounding like a husky version of herself, one with a 2-pack-a-day, 20-year smoking habit, but not one who was going to scream or cry anymore. Judgy wine lady stared at Else, her horror reflected in the mirror. As Else made eye contact with her through the mirror, she tried to look away, but apparently was unable to, horrified and judgmental. And Mary stared at her, Mary from in front, and the wine lady stared at her from behind in the mirror, as did the others in the store. And Else heard, "Do you know who I am?" which could only have come from one of the other customers mocking her. And she looked, and at first she almost couldn't focus on anyone. And then slowly she saw that the man behind Judgy Wine Lady was that angry man who she'd run out of the place so many months ago, smirking at her now, whispering at her, "Do you know who I am?" Smirking and whispering. And then she heard another almost whisper, "Who's doing TMI now?" And there in the mirror behind the angry man, but it couldn't be because she was dead, was Beth, distraught, but staring wide-eyed directly at Else. And then Sven behind her laughing, and Gerard asking, "What's it like to love no one, to be loved by no one?" And then Stephen's voice, but no, that had to be in her head. What if no one ever wants you and you end up alone? And then there he was, reflected in the mirror, standing by the door, so sad for her and shaking his head. And her mother next to him. "I knew you'd end up alone." And Jay, mournful and shaking his head at her. "Why, Else, why?" "Else," came a voice, and she jumped and tore her gaze away from the mirror and turned to her left, and it was Ben. Are you okay?" And over his voice, all those other voices, dead Beth and her mother and Stephen and Gerard, and somehow even Lala was there from Florida in the mirror, and the sympathy in his voice threw her over the edge, and she had to get out immediately. She couldn't stand any of it anymore, and she blurted, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." And she pushed past the bitchy wine lady behind her, who was shocked and almost paralyzed and couldn't move to get out of her way. And the voices were still in her head, but those people were not there anymore, just the customers who were staring, uncertain what to do. But the voices, oh, the voices were still with Else. Fuck, the voices, and her with all those pills for depression and anxiety, but no voices. There had to be pills for voices. She pushed through the door, half laughing, half crying, which resulted in a barking noise, which she thought must be where the phrase "barking mad" comes from. And she beelined for her car, not bothering to wipe the tears away anymore, hyperventilating now with the sobs and the laughs and the barks, barking fucking mad, and unlocked the car with the automatic button on her fob, and then yanked the door open and more or less fell in, almost not getting her feet in before the door closed behind her. Do people who are barking mad feel relief, she wondered, when no other people can see them and no other people can experience with them the depths of their madness, and they're all alone with their madness? It must feel like relief. I'm mad, but at least I'm alone. What the fuck was all of that? A hallucination? A delusional break? Some freaky out-of-body experience? But now safety in the car. And she looked up into the rearview mirror to see how devastated her face and her makeup was. And yes, pale, blotchy and red, swollen, wild-eyed. And then she heard Stephen's voice again, and her brain filled up with whispers and laughter. And she looked past herself, and crowded behind her in the mirror were all those faces of all those voices, and they were whispering her darkest fears about herself. They may as well have been yelling, "You are stupid and fat and ridiculous and old and embarrassing, and no one will ever want you. And why don't you just let all that blood drip away? And who cares who will clean it up? You'll be gone, gone, gone. No more Else. Gone, gone, gone. Just go. No one wants you anyway." And she screamed, "Stop it," and jammed the key in the ignition. And her only thought was to get home and cram an anti-anxiety or 2 or 4 into her system. And she drove away yelling, "I am not listening to you, la, 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 la. I am not listening to you," and hoped that she made it to her house without crashing or ending up institutionalized, which is clearly where she motherfucking belonged. La, 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 la. That's it.
Yeah, that was good. But no suicidal ideation trigger warning for anybody.
Oh, I'm
though.
so sorry. I should have done that. I apologize.
It's okay. But yeah, that was really good. And I had to say something because I am immature, but no, it was really
I should have thought about that beforehand. It was just the most intense, bleak thing that came to mind to read for this session. So, noted. Apologies.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely was intense and bleak. And Shannon and I really enjoyed the judgy wine bitch. That was great terminology.
I am not going to claim that no one in my novels is ever based on real people. So take that how you will.
Okay. Well, I know it wasn't me because I enabled
No.
wine consumption. So
no, I'm just saying that in my life, I may or may not have met a person on whom that character was based. But also, I wrote that quite a long time ago, so it's nobody in the immediate vicinity, nobody that is a mutual.
It's a shame, though. They really deserve to be exposed.
I'm saying.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Deb.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So next up, we have Shannon. So yes, hello.
Hi.
Well, so this is exciting. We're going to be spending lots of quality time together
This
at
weekend.
Mile High Con. Yes, so that's cool. Yeah, you're on a whole bunch of panels, and I'm, we're on, I think, 3 together, or at least 2 together, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool.
I was on a podcast one too, and then I think that they must have moved it earlier. And I think I had a "don't put me on before 11" rule.
Yes. Yes, similar. That's not a time that exists for me.
No. Like, if you want me at my best.
Right.
Put me on some night panels. That's what you should do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All righty. Well, so what are you going to be reading tonight?
So this one's brand spanking new. So you guys are the test audience on this. It's The Pitter Patter of Tiny Feet. And
awesome.
It's not a Halloween story, but it's set on Halloween. So.
All right. I will leave you to it.
All right. The sweet rot scent of a street full of shattered pumpkins filled the night. Toilet paper drifted lazily from a tree with barren, reaching limbs. Only one jack-o'-lantern sat unmolested, one home untouched by the teenage savages of Lawn Street. The widow's home crouched at the end of the street in all its creepy glory, backed up to the darkened, skeletal woods. Leaves skittered on crispy feet, a herd of detritus heading toward the widow's home. Light shone through the windows in patches around the newspapers she taped against the glass, creating tendrils of brightness against the dark. Inside, a warm fire glowed in the living room. As gloomy as the house was from outside, the interior was tidy, a once loving home. The widow, once and forever known as Mrs. Morris, though she'd always loved Violet as her first name, huddled in a stuffed velvet armchair. Despite the fire and the soft throw wrapped around her shoulders, all she could feel was the cold. Goosebumps pinched her skin. The clack of her teeth chattering battled the pop of the burning wood. Ever since her husband and son had died in the car accident, the house had been frigid. Though she filled her belly with hot teas and soups and wore the warmest clothes she could find, warmth never embraced her. She had nested here in her chair, the fire as perpetual company, because the farther she got from the stove, the colder she became. It had reached her bones, the clammy air seeping through the layers of skin like missiles seeking a target. A tooth had shattered from the constant chattering just the other day, sending an ache through her jaw that exhausted her. She wanted only to sleep, to forget about her loss and the cold in the air and the pain. but they wouldn't let her. Eyes drifting shut, Violet felt her thoughts growing murky and nebulous. Sounds faded. Her body relaxed, shivers pacing themselves farther apart. The sound of the crash, a hollow metallic whoomp, jolted her from the limbo of near sleep. As always, the sound of her son's screams followed. Her husband panting, his seatbelt clicking uselessly as he tried to disengage, calling, "Hold on!" The screams persisted, a constant litany of agony and terror. She hadn't been in the accident, but she heard it every night. As soon as she started to drift away into blessed oblivion, the sounds came, wretched and torturous. Night after night, she relived an accident she hadn't been party to, an accident that had torn everything she held dear from her. Violet covered her ears, praying now, something she hadn't done since she gave up religion in her teen years. Words slipped from her mouth in a rapid procession of beseeching, of pleading that this torment stop. It wasn't her fault they'd died. Why should she relive it constantly? The pain in their last moments was more than she could stand. Tonight had brought her a brief reprieve, thanks to the children trick-or-treating outside, but now her grief rushed back in. It was the only thing stronger than the dread, this grief, a rending of her soul. It tore at her with vicious claws and sharpened teeth. Outside, the quality of the wind changed. It lessened by degrees, the air pressure releasing. Violet's ears popped. Then came the silence, just like every night. It was as if a cocoon had formed around her house. No matter what was happening to the rest of the neighborhood, the weather ceased to exist over 3235 Lawn Street. Silence made it so she could hear their approach. "The better to hear your footsteps, my loves," she whispered. From the forest behind the house came the crunch of that first step. It sounded tentative, but that never lasted. There was no need for her to check the doors and windows. She spent the entire day checking and rechecking them, ensuring they were locked. It didn't matter that no lock could keep them out if they truly wanted in. It didn't matter that part of her wanted to let them in, to rush to the door and greet them, to hold them in her arms one more time. The crisp footfalls grew louder now, closer. There were two sets of footsteps, one more rapid than the other. One step was always louder than the others, as if more weight were being put on that foot. Next came the sobs, the sniffles of her sweet baby boy. Only 6 years old, Ollie had been such a good boy. He'd rarely cried, yet the sound struck her deep inside, so familiar that she never could have failed to recognize it. These were the tears of her child when he missed one of his parents, when he felt alone and abandoned. He'd always needed Violet more than her husband, Colin, needed his mommy who rarely left their home so she could better be there for him. It hurt her heart to hear him crying, his staggering steps. The seatbelt had torn him nearly in two, twisted as it had been. The sharp edge had slid through his abdomen like butter, impaling itself in his intestines. She wished she'd never heard the details. Who would have leaked such a thing? Why did the paper have to write it? Colin, legs crushed, had tried to get back to Ollie to save him, but when he'd changed positions to arch himself over the seat, it had set loose an internal chain reaction, delayed only by how he'd been positioned. The damage had been lurking, waiting for him to shift. They'd found his blood sprayed down his chin and across Ollie's face, dark against the child's pale skin, all the whiter for his own blood loss. Colin had stretched an arm out, collapsed, his hand landing on Ollie's knee where they would find Ollie's soft fingers wrapped around his father's thumb. What no one other than Violet knew was that her baby's final word had been mommy, choked out in a guttural caw. She knew because she heard that every night too. When the footsteps hit the back porch and slowly made their way up the 3 steps, Violet released the keening howl that had been working its way up her throat. She didn't want to deal with this again. It repeated every night, and every night she was too weak to do anything about it, to change what must always come next. She couldn't face this yet again, but she had no choice. The footsteps worked their way across the porch. So much closer now, only feet from where Violet sat. From upstairs, the sound of different footsteps. Quick and light, they ran across the floor above Violet. Outside, the steps were heavy, both sets. From the kitchen now, a heavier tread, though still lighter than those outside. The refrigerator door opened, with the curt suctioning of the seal being pulled apart, the whir of the fan inside, a peep of light across the floor into the living room. Violet couldn't see the refrigerator from her chair, but she knew the sounds all too well. Terror hammered at her chest. The lighter steps reached the top of the stairs. After a pause, the coiled sound of a slinky came, sprawling down the steps, zipped the orange plastic slinky. It was painstakingly slow, time stretching as Violet watched its progress with wide eyes. From the kitchen, "Honey, where's the beer?" The refrigerator closed with a tinkle of condiment bottles from the shelves in the door. The footsteps began again, approaching the living room. The sound of tiny bare feet pattered down the stairs. Outside, the footsteps stopped at the door. The knob turned with a slight squeak. The cold increased. Violet couldn't feel even a hint of the warmth from the stove. She squeezed her eyes shut, willed it all away. In happier days, Violet would have been preparing Ollie for bed after the craziness of trick-or-treating. He was always so full of energy still, hyped up on sugar from the candy bars he'd enjoyed already. Every year, Violet swore she'd limit his candy intake better, and every year she found it so hard to say no amidst the revelry and excitement of the day. Colin would scatter, but he was no better at it than she. Ollie asked for so little. Turning him down when he asked for another piece of candy seemed unfair. The exterior door creaked open. The crying ceased. There were now 4 sets of footsteps coming at her across the hardwood floor. A liquid plop joined the steps, 1 wet splash for every 2 short steps. She squeezed her eyes tighter, fought to think of the happy times. Halloween was her favorite holiday, unlike both Colin and Ollie, who adored Christmas the most. She'd wipe the chocolate from her son's mouth and tell him to go brush his teeth. His feet would patter across the floorboards, then up the steps. Running water would indicate he'd started his bedtime ritual. No bath on Halloween night. It would keep him up too late. Violet looked forward to her annual rewatch of Halloween, and she couldn't watch it until Ollie went down for bed. A giggle sounded from the direction of the stairs, the sweet sound of her baby's voice. It felt impossible to keep her eyes closed, as if they were being pried open from inside. She wanted to see him one more time, whole and perfect, but she knew he wasn't her baby anymore. The scent of rotten meat reached her now. She choked on the stench so thick it slathered itself across her tongue with the taste of spoiled pork. She'd been overwhelmed with always being on, with always being mom and wife. All she'd asked was that Colin take him out for a daddy-son date, that they spend some time away from the house so Violet could get some cleaning done and maybe even get some quiet reading time. They'd all been excited for the change of pace. Colin hadn't had fast food in ages, not with Violet always fussing about feeding their son a healthy diet. He'd pumped Ollie up for their date, dressed in a vest and bow tie, then put on his own tie, all for a fast food burger and some time at the park. The footsteps surrounded her, then went to silence. Only the wet plop sounded now, a soft patter on the floor. The cold was merciless, an icy ache that swirled around her, inside her. Her stomach flopped, her soup and tea burning its way up her throat. The photo the newspaper printed had shown the fast food bag on the concrete outside the shattered vehicle, where the door had been wrenched open by the emergency responders. The small toy car from the child's meal had rolled several feet, and the paper had placed a close-up of it, the real car a blur behind it, right next to the one of the open door. She'd focused on the toy, trying not to see the bodies of her loved ones in the first photo, her husband's staring face hanging backward over the seat, her son's slumped figure so tiny in the vast sea of the vehicle's back seat. The editor had been fired for letting the photos through, the descriptions, but what good did that do her after the damage was already done? Their bodies in the morgue had been cold, hard, and misshapen. They hadn't seemed real, not like the 2 people she'd loved so much. Pale, waxy skin, no expression whatsoever. The stillness and silence had made it all the more exaggerated. The chemical scent of the sterile room had burned her nostrils and throat. She thought she'd want to touch them, to say goodbye, but the horror of their dead bodies lying before her had repulsed her, pushed her to flee the room, to not look back. These weren't her darlings. This hadn't happened. She wanted to take it all back, to make them a nice dinner, to gather around the television set. She didn't want to be in a morgue. The house was so empty when she got home, but it had rarely been empty since then. Upstairs, the water started running. In the master bedroom, she heard the spring squeak as something rose from the bed. Her blanket pulled back, and still she kept her eyes shut. It slid away, leaving her exposed. Something cold and hard grasped her hand, peeled the clenched fingers back. Violet held her breath. She whimpered. Into her hand slid the toy car, its wheels rolling across her palm. She'd only wanted a break. What she'd gotten instead was the constant company of ghosts and a nightly visit from her dead husband and child. Upstairs, the water stopped, bare feet pit-patting down the steps. Unable to resist any longer, she opened her eyes and found herself utterly alone. That's it. The end.
That sounds sad. All right. So let's see. Steve is MIA at the moment, but I will just, he's back.
Back.
You have reappeared.
I've reappeared.
Well, thank you everybody for the stories tonight. Let's see. Oh yes, so yeah, Jeff was definitely a fan of your story, Shannon. So that's good. All right, so let's see. Does anyone want to share their new and exciting writing related stuff? Are there things going on?
It's been a bit slow for me. But
Okay.
I do have a story coming out in Indecent magazine. It's supposed to
Ooh,
release a double issue on Halloween night, and I think it's all free to read online. So
that's cool. I'll
yay!
definitely check that out.
I can't announce other news I got yet. Sadly, I checked to make sure because we're waiting on one more person to sign. So I can't.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, that's all right. I don't want to get you in trouble. So, let's see.
Yeah, we already mentioned that I have the new book out now.
Mhm.
I've ordered hard copies of that that I plan to have at the Southern Colorado Comic Con coming up on November 5th in Pueblo at the
Nice.
fairgrounds. So I'll be there. Um, there's also a signing for the Pikes Peak Writers anthologies that will be, I believe it's on the 27th at Tattered Cover in Colorado Springs in the evening.
Is this October 27th?
Yes,
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you've got a story in there, right?
I do. In the
That's
second anthology.
awesome. All right. Yeah, well, so Deb, what's shaking?
I'm mostly in the cycle of submissions and waiting out rejections and resubmitting right now, which is a good place for me to be because wasn't submitting for a little while. And I'm hoping to do the cover reveal for the Write Drunk Get It Sober book version here shortly.
Yay.
And yeah, so that's kind of final stage. Shannon posts pictures of all of the screen. I love it.
I have to do it every time.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that that's done. It's in sort of preliminary layouts and whatever. It's coming along nicely.
Excellent. Well, let's see. Any exciting Halloween plans for anybody?
I'm just looking forward to starting I like the whole month and I've been working. So next week I've already told bosses, it's like I'm gonna be taking some days off to do some stuff. I don't know what stuff, but I'm gonna do some stuff because it's Halloween month. It's the entire thing is a holiday, and I've missed it so far. So
I think the world falls neatly into people whose favorite holiday is Christmas and people whose favorite holiday is Halloween. And I'm firmly in the Halloween bucket. So
Yeah.
definitely.
hoping to get some scary decorations up late this weekend. May do front porch drinks for Halloween night. We'll see how that plays out.
Yay. I'm looking forward to having books out again because I haven't been able to do that. We didn't do it, obviously, that first pandemic year because, nobody knew what to do. All right. So I think we didn't give out candy or anything. And then this last year it rained and it looks like it's going to be nice next week. So I have years worth of books that are going to be out front for the trick-or-treaters.
Nice.
I'm excited.
All right. Yep. Well, we will be wearing T-Rex costumes, and Ernie has his own T-Rex costume, so we'll be doing that.
Looking forward to the pictures of that.
Absolutely. Is it the inflatable ones?
Ones? They're onesies because we figured, we'll be watching horror movies and sitting on the couch between trick-or-treaters, so it would have been hard. But there was this inflatable one we were really drawn to where it's not just the one that goes over the whole body, you're riding the T-Rex.
Nice.
But yeah, seemed impractical, so we're doing the onesies.
I feel like my son had that one where he was riding a dinosaur a couple years ago.
Cool.
Terrible mother. I can't remember for sure. I feel like he did.
Yeah, time just blurs together. So
it really does at this point. I'm like,
It's been the last couple of years have particularly been like that too. So I have did that happen before that? Did that happen during?
Yeah.
When was it? That it was in one of the last 3 years, probably. Maybe.
Was that pre or post apocalypse?
I have a before and after, but and there's a demarcation line for me, but everything after was a little blurry there for a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yes. Well, I guess we can wrap up for tonight, and hopefully I'll see everybody back for November. I mean, not necessarily, on the show, although Deb will be on the show because Deb's going to be
I'm super excited to be hosting that night.
Yes, it'll be good. You'll actually have somebody who's fun on here for a change, so that'll be nice.
I feel like that's unfair to you. Also, Amy did a great job hosting Right Drunk, Edit Sober. We had a lot of fun, and I actually got to write for a change, which was super fun for me.
Yay! Yeah, I missed it.
So it was the big Deb Amy crossover episode, I guess. So
yeah, it was fun. So
only Ferret flips next month now.
All right. Well, I hope that, everybody has a good rest of the week and happy Halloween in advance. And yeah, we'll be talking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, so that wraps our show. If you would like to read on here, check out the Facebook group or page and just either go ahead and message me there, or you can send an email to amystorieslive@gmail.com and just let me know what dates you want to read for. I do a broadcast every third Monday of the month, except for December and July and August. So anything else is fair game. So just let me know. And yeah, see you next month.